My name is Julie, and I'm with Autism Canada, and I'm going to be the moderator tonight. Just before we start, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. So I'd just like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the land that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join us in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you. Again, I'm Julie, and I'm with Autism Canada. And I'd just like to thank those of you, some of you who have donated when you register. I'd just like to thank those of you who have donated. We're able to run these free educational sessions because of the generosity of our donors. And we really, really do appreciate that and are grateful. If you would like to make a donation after the event, you're more than welcome to do so, of course, at our website, www.autismcanada.org. I want to introduce our panel. Those of you who were with us last week already have this information, but for those of you who are new, Bruce Petherick is here, and Bruce is an autistic advocate and member of the Autism Canada Family Services team. He's also an amazing musician. He's a father to 2 neurodivergent kids, and he's an educator. You can learn more about Bruce, especially his musical side, at brucepetherick.com. And yes, I'm mentioning it again, Bruce, so get that website going. Next is Cara Dymond. Cara is an honorary member of the Autism Canada team. She's a late diagnosed autistic advocate, author of The Autism Lens. I highly recommend you checking out her book. And she's teacher to autistic children in a large Canadian school board and a teacher instructor at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, where she teaches a graduate course in mental health and special education. She also hosts a great podcast called Autistic Tidbits and Tangents. And I forgot to link that last week in my follow-up email. So I promise to do that tomorrow, so you can all take a listen. You can also learn more about Cara at her website, which is caradymond.com. And finally, Dominique Chabot is Autism Canada's Family Services Manager, and she's also one of my fabulous colleagues. She is a parent to 2 boys on the autism spectrum and has plentiful experience with navigating the school system for both of her boys. So she does have 2 kids in school, and they started today. So she's very excited that they had their first day at school today, and she has lots to talk. We'll have lots to talk about tonight. As we all know, back to school, it can be a tough transition. So we hope that these webinars help and alleviate some stress for the whole family. We're going to talk a bit about self-care tonight again. And with respect to our topics tonight, we're going to try and hit on self-advocacy, accommodations, what to do after school on the first days back, self-care for the whole family, and then homework. Homework's a big one, obviously. So we're going to try and hit all of those topics tonight. And so I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to hand it over to the panel to get the conversation started. Again, add your questions in the chat, and we'll get going. Over to you guys.
I'd just like to start by with a little conversation that Bruce and I had today over messaging. And we were talking about the term accommodations. And I hate that term. I really think when we call it accommodations, it sounds like it's something extra we do as teachers for children that, you know, perhaps they should be grateful for, or their families should be grateful for, that we do in the first place. And for kids, it makes them feel like they're getting something extra too, and they might feel bad about that. I think we need to change the language to learning tools, because they should be available to everyone, and it should just be assumed as part of our job that we provide the things as best we can for students who need them, whether they have an identified exceptionality or not. So Bruce and I were talking a little bit about that today in preparation for this.
That's an important point to raise, not only from the teacher's perspective, but also from the student's perspective, and also the parent's perspective, in that although that word accommodation has been used historically, when Cara and I get our way and start to run the world, we want to make sure that everybody understands that these are different learning tools and strategies, and they are useful for everybody at different times. The normalization of this is really super important.
Okay, I'm already going to talk because I have I have some experience with this, and I think you're bang on. My son had a teacher in grade 4 who, when the behavioral team suggested that she give him time with the iPad, said, "I can't do that because then I'd have to do it for everybody." And I feel like that is, one of the issues we have today, which is just because, well, first of all, just because one child is using a tool doesn't mean every child needs that tool. But on the other side of that, maybe every child should have access to these tools. So
Agreed.
that's just my experience, and I'm going to leave it with you to discuss.
No, I did something this year in my graduate course for beginning teachers where I called it tool of the day. So every day I introduced a new accessibility tool. And I said, you can teach this to your whole class and say, test it out, see if it works for you, and let me know. Let me know if this works for your brain or not. And I talk a lot too about, things like fidget tools being tools, not toys. And we can introduce a tool and say, this is available for those who need it, test it out, see if you like it. And you teach the difference between tool or toy. So you can say, doesn't look like it's being used as a tool right now. Do you need it? And if you need it, use it as a tool. And if not, maybe pick something else. And like I have always found when you introduce a tool, there's novelty the first time. Everyone's excited. They want to touch it. They want to do whatever it is. They want to look at it. But within a day or two, it's really only the ones who need it who are still seeking it out because the novelty has faded.
It's a really good point. Again, Cara, what a great point you raised. Kids will, like, you give them the option to use an iPad or a calculator or a scribe, whatever. Yes, the first couple of times, basically everyone will do it just because it's new and it's fun and it is a toy. But I found in my experience, and I understand I usually teach at a higher age group, that people get sick of it. And it's like, I don't need the iPad, I'm not going to use it. But what's super important is the time that they do need that iPad for something, it's available.
And if you start out your year in September and you're taking the time to say, everyone needs different things in this classroom, and what does your brain need? What's hard for your brain? What's easy for your brain? What things help you when things are tough? And parents, you can have that same discussion at home. But doing that, you're already setting up a climate where it is okay for people to need and use and access different things.
Can we talk a bit about what accommodations parents can ask
Learning
for?
Tools.
Yeah. Sorry.
Tools and teaching strategies.
Can we talk about what learning tools parents can ask for, should be asking for, how they ask for them, what the best strategy for that is? I think that's an important question that a lot of parents have.
Maybe actually before that, Dominique, what has been your experience with that? Asking for learning tools or strategies?
I have I've had some luck the past several years where for my youngest, who is in a mainstream class and requires some partial support, meaning that they would pull him out to do or to help him focus, whether it's what's being taught at that very moment is probably too advanced for him and he needs that one-on-one support. But he's in grade 5 now, and he's coming to the realization that he doesn't want to be pulled out because he doesn't want to come across as someone who requires that extra attention. So what we were able to build the past couple of years, because it's a small school, but the teachers all kind of know each other. And it's a great communication between the teachers because, this year's school teacher has actually consulted with last year's school teacher to find out what worked best. So for last year, what was brought up, and this was completely the teacher's idea, was to have a hamper of various fidgeting tools and supports that the entire class had access to. And it was one of those things where, every month or so she'd switch them up. but every child in this classroom had access to this. And apparently there was a lot of kids who required these tools.
Yeah.
Another thing that was a huge success was, and I mentioned it in the last series that we had, the last session, was oftentimes my little guy who's severely ADHD needs to run. He just needs to exert that energy. He's got so much, I don't know where he gets it from. It's not from me, but he's got a lot of bottled up energy. And again, this hinders his ability to focus and stay focused. So oftentimes they would pull him out to go and run the track outside. But what they've done is he'd be allowed to invite a friend or even two from his classroom and rotate that, that group of friends to race, just to go for a quick race. It was a 5-minute exercise just to help him auto-regulate and exert that energy in order for him to focus. And it was just like a quick, little activity, and it was very beneficial for these kids. So I'm curious to see how it's going to work out this year, but I know that the lines of communication are open, and it's important for me to keep that communication going. And if I have any suggestions or ideas that are inclusive for all, I will put those forward, whether it's through the IEP meeting or just that one-on-one communication with his teacher.
Mm-hmm. I would. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, well, actually, sorry. I want to emphasize something that Dominic has just said, using a resource on Kara's website. At Autism Canada, we often get people asking, I want to buy, what's a fidget toy that I can buy for my child? And the truth is, every child's going to want something different, and every child is going to want something different at a different time. Mm-hmm. So what's important with the fidget tools, and this is neurodiverse or neurotypical. On Kara's website, she has a little pamphlet on what a child thinks, which tool would be useful in a certain circumstance. And I think that's really important. We often don't think about the teaching that's necessary for a fidget tool. It's not, we just can't just give it to the kids and go, there you go, everything's fixed now, because what's the child going to do with them? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we want them, like I have for my stones, they're just grounding, the points for grounding. But sometimes we kind of, in Dominic's case with her youngest child, sometimes where you can't leave a classroom for a certain, whatever reason, and there are reasons that's useful, then the fidget tool that's necessary is something that maybe is a little more active. Maybe a fidget spinner, maybe whatever, because each child's going to have strengths and weaknesses. So not only, it's not just we have the fidget tools, we also need to teach the children, the students, what to do with them in I'm going to say the best way, but just what to do with them.
Mm-hmm. And I have suggestions on there as well, or linking to my blog in a post about how you can teach fidget tools as a family, which is very similar to how I do it in the classroom. But that's really important. If you happen to be sending in a fidget, you want to be sure your child knows how to use it, and you especially want to think about what works best at different times, right? Like something that has lights up or makes a noise, probably not so good during an instructional period where the teacher's teaching a lesson. Though there are certainly times when that can be used, maybe during a work period, certainly at recess. But talk to your child about that, and obviously talk with the teacher as well if you're sending something in. So getting back to Julie's original question about accommodations that work, and that you should be able to ask for learning tools and strategies, definitely letting the teacher know if I think all autistic children should have more breaks, even if they don't seem to need it. I think breaks are important to build in for ongoing wellness and managing of energy, because school is so demanding on our energy in so many ways. So letting them know that breaks are something that works for your child. And then you can have further conversations about what those look like. I think some kids really need movement breaks, like Dominique was mentioning. And you could talk to your child about like quiet breaks, reading at their desk, making origami, drawing, whatever it is, and set some parameters around that, like how long it could be. Really, the teacher should set the parameters, but I think you working collaboratively with the teacher and then reinforcing that is important. I think homework accommodations, I don't think there should be homework, but that's another conversation. But certainly having a photo taken of the homework board instead of having to write it in the agenda is a reasonable accommodation. Whether it's your child taking the photo or the teacher or somebody in the class and uploading it to Google Classroom or whatever portal they use, access to fidgets during lessons, different, and then making suggestions for other support needs. Like, if your child needs more help organizing ideas, you can just let the teacher know they might need help scaffolding these things. Closed captions on videos. I have found so many of my students really, really benefit from and find it so much easier to follow along and interpret what is being said, because many of us have auditory processing issues. And that can really make the difference. So ask your child if that's something that works for them, and then that's something that you or they can express to the teacher. My sort of what I think when I think about what is reasonable to ask, I would think it through from the lens of, is this something that is, we can ask for the moon, but I always do think about, is this something that is reasonable to ask the teacher to provide everyone, or is this sort of like a private, like there are private accommodations as well, such as scribing on a test. The teacher can't possibly scribe all the time, 100% of the time. So that would be something I would put on the IEP in particular, something that is like a sort of a special occasion thing. And then things that you can ask for that first week are more things that are pretty easy to slide into the existing framework of the class, if that makes sense.
And it's in two points. You don't have to have an IEP or a IPP set up to ask for these. I think too many parents think, oh, I can't ask for anything if I don't, unless we have the documentation. Now, documentation is really, 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 really important, but these are things that you can ask for at any stage. And to reinforce what Kara's saying, maybe from a different angle, it's always a negotiation. Teachers certain teachers will be more open to certain things and be resistant to certain things. Some teachers will be completely okay in certain for different learning tools to be used in different teaching times, and sometimes just refuse. That's the negotiation aspect. If you can get 80% of your supports, that's an 80% win. Yes, we should be expecting the moon. Yes, we should be expecting everybody to be fully accommodated, to use the words, but it's negotiation, and it's reality. Maybe I know I'm not supposed to have a great grasp on that sort of thing.
And I'm noticing that Carrie wrote that in New Brunswick, these are known as universal accommodations, meaning any child can use them, which is fantastic.
That's exactly right.
I was going to say something and now I forget what it was. It's gone. Oh, I know. I have a question. Experts. So my eldest son has an IEP. He's going into grade 10. And when I mentioned to the teacher that he is supposed to get extra time on tests, maybe this will ring true with somebody else, they said, oh, everyone gets extra time on tests. That was their answer. And as far as I'm concerned, an IEP is a legal and binding document, so he should be getting extra time on top of the extra time that all the other kids are getting. Is that how it? I'm not quite sure how to address that.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
I have a couple of thoughts. So yes, IEP is legally binding. If it's there, they should have it if they need. Your child can certainly say they don't want the extra time if they don't. Two thoughts. So one is extra time isn't always the best. unless there are breaks built in. So it's called time off the clock. And this comes from Russell Barkley, who is a psychologist, I believe, or psychiatrist, I'm not sure. And what you want is to give breaks so that like the brain has time to kind of relax, and because otherwise you're just giving more time to possibly be distracted in. So a break, like a movement break, and then the clock resuming when the break is over. That's actually much more helpful than just more time. I would say, so if the teacher has a policy, has a personal policy where every student, if they need more time, they can write this test for as long as they need, then it actually would not need to go on the IEP, but you would have to really investigate that. Is that actually their policy? Or are they just saying, I do this for everyone, and there's not actually the follow through? Right. But I, as a teacher, if I have a policy of I accommodate everyone with what they need, and I that is available to everyone, it actually doesn't have to go on the IEP because it's available to everyone.
If in fact it is.
If in fact it is. So that's where you have to go.
Okay.
My daughter had a teacher last year who, again, grade 10, who basically didn't worry about time in exams or tests. So if they said it's a 1 hour test, at the end of the 1 hour, they didn't just go and pick up everyone's paper. They basically gave everybody enough time to finish it. And if my memory serves me correctly, they could take it home to finish if necessary. Sometimes with a point loss, but they also were not very, I think the point loss was more to stop cheating at home. Like if it's a closed book exam, there could be a reason why you want to make something a closed book exam, and so therefore taking it home, there's a trust issue, and so maybe they lose. And I think it was like 2% or 3%. It was kind of like, okay, whatever. But that was certainly that was one experience. But on the other hand, they also had a teacher who was like, it's 60 minutes and 60 minutes, and if Sky needed to use more time, they had to go to the learning center and use the extra time. They were very strict with it.
Yeah, so I'd probably push for more time and time off the clock, right? Building in breaks. But if it's especially if they have multiple teachers, right? So you would still want it in the IEP, and then it's just not necessary in that teacher's class if that's their policy, that everyone has as much time as they need.
Got it. Thank you. I love this comment from Jamie that her daughter's in 12th grade and her IEP entitles her to more time or chunking if she prefers. Chunking lets her do half the test one day and half another. That's great. So I feel like we've covered learning strategies pretty well. Do you guys have anything else to add there? Because we have a lot of things to talk about tonight, and I want to make sure we get to them all. Anything else to add there? Everyone feel comfortable with that? And if you have more questions, you're welcome to email. So homework, we can talk about that now, or we can talk about what to do after school on their first days back.
Okay.
Sorry, could we? Sorry. Can we finish something that we didn't do last week before we get on to this week? And that's the self-care for the whole family.
Yeah.
It may be something also that can, as we answer these other next questions, that we're also responding to that.
Perfect.
So when the four of us were discussing this topic a little while ago, one of the things we often talk about making sure that your neurodivergent child is ready for school, and this is all the steps you should be doing. And one of the things we kind of realized is that you also have to make sure, if you're in a family with neurotypical and neurodivergent children, or even just for the parent, and I don't mean just for the parent, but the parent's important as well, is that there has to be, if you're spending this much time preparing your neurotypical child for this, make sure you're also spending time on yourself and other children so that they're not feeling left out. And we had some suggestions about, maybe special dates, making some, going on a special outing very specifically for a neurotypical child rather than a neurodivergent child, making sure that parents are having a clear night to themselves sometime, probably in, let's say this week, the week before school goes back. And I'll let somebody else talk now.
No, I mean, thinking about one of Julie's questions, expect that first couple of weeks, that the energy cost of school and probably the energy cost of your child going to school for you is going to be much higher. So you have to build in breaks for yourself, build in breaks for your child, make sure when you get home, when they get, it's harder for you as the adult, but make sure when people get home that they have time to decompress. For children, that might mean, 30 minutes to an hour where they can do something that's quiet, they can do something, they can just go to their room and lie on their bed if that's what they want. But like that, let your child know it's okay that they need breaks, because throughout their life, that's going to be one of their best strategies to self-regulate and take care of themselves is accounting for, how exhausting it can be to do things around people in a very social environment where even the curriculum, like the academic curriculum is social, and then you're also dealing with trying to interpret and understand instructions from a person who is a social being, and figure out what they're asking you to do on top of just trying to learn what's being taught, right?
Dominique, you're in this situation right now. What's happening?
Oh, well, and this kind of would fall under what to do after school. And I think today was a great example of being able to allow my child to communicate with me at his level. So I was working, I work from home, and in my office, I have two computers. One is for Autism Canada and the other one is our family computer. And my youngest came in after school and he sat next to me and he turned on his Minecraft, and on his terms, he told me about his day. I wasn't probing too much. I know that he needed that time to decompress, but he still wanted to see me because he was used to having, to being at home and around the family. And so I kind of realized today that, and of course he's getting older, that time after school, I'd like to give him the opportunity to do whatever it is that he feels he needs to do to decompress. If that means coming in my office and, quietly playing Minecraft, and maybe on occasion piping up and telling me about how he spent his day, that's great. At the dinner table, we talk about everyone's day and what was special about their day, blah, blah, blah. But after school, some parents really want their kids to do their homework right after school. But I honestly feel that my recommendation for both my kids on the spectrum is give them that space, give them that time to decompress. My oldest, when he came home, he went straight down to his bedroom. He had to do a Google search for Mr. Bruce and to find out what kind of whale, I don't know. But anyhow, then he went and played the piano, and that was his way of decompressing. So I need to give them that space. I think it's really important, and let them come to me when they're ready.
I am pain of asking way too many questions right after school.
I was just going to say that.
The number of times my youngest has said to me, "Stop asking me questions," is, you'd think I would have learned by now, but I am so interested in how his day went that I can't help myself. I'm really bad at it, but this is my goal for this year, is to let him come home, let him do his thing, and not ask a million questions, because it eventually comes out. I just need to be more patient.
Julie, if you watch like any sitcom from like the 1930s to like even now, that behavior is modeled for us. Sorry, the incorrect behavior, or the behavior we're suggesting is not a good behavior, is always shown. It's always the kids get home from school and immediately they sit down with usually mom, and this is what happened to school, blah, 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 or any conflict. It's just like the kids need that decompression so badly. And the first week, it's like, actually, Julie, in the first week, maybe just leave the house for an hour or something.
That might be the best
Self-care
strategy, to be
for
honest. That might be
Yeah.
the best strategy.
Just
He takes
it's
transit now. So I used to pick, well, during COVID, I was picking him up. So he'd get in the car and be like, how was your day? Who'd you talk to today? What were you doing? What did you learn? What did you do? And now he's taking the transit home. So it's a little less in his face right away. But yes, I think you're right. I think I probably should just lock myself up.
You'll get the best out of him when you let him come to you on his terms.
Oh,
I've realized that. I
know.
think.
Yeah, I know that. I'm just obsessed. Anyway, carry on.
So-
One thing I want to mention too is, so I've heard this from many of my students, that often they are most comfortable socializing online, like on video games and things like that with people. So sometimes the tendency can be, that's like when you want to focus on homework and all these things, that's what goes, but that might be the time your child is most comfortable. So as long as you know who they're talking to, you're monitoring kind of that, like the safety aspects, but that might be when they feel most socially connected and socially competent. So I'm very much in favor when we can allow children to have those opportunities, because their neurotypical peers get to do those things too, right? Neurotypical peers are playing video games and chatting with friends online and things like that. So just a little plug for allowing that when we can.
And also on that point, which I mean, Dominique, what you're doing is parallel playing with your youngest. In other words, they're coming home into playing Minecraft. And by the way, if any parent in here doesn't know what Minecraft is, it is like the best, safest game for kids. Because it's not passive, there's active. It's like building Lego. They can have interactions if you allow them to have interactions online with other people, but also it's just a space to build, and I find it the most calming thing. Anyway, parallel play is allowing that to happen next to you as you're doing something else, and it's amazing how much wonderful social conversation happens in that when we are not setting the rules, when we're not saying this is the time you need to speak, but just allowing it to happen organically. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, Minecraft is it's still so popular. Like I've seen trends, I've seen things come and go, but Minecraft has been very consistent, and I think it's because of the creativity and being able, well, there's multiple modes you can play in, but one is just creative mode where you are building things and creating your own world and exploring that. And it gives kids things to talk about, because so many kids talk about this game. So I think that's another reason it's important to do some of those things.
My 13-year-old has come back to it. He stopped for a while and he was playing some other maybe not as great games, and now he's come back to it and it's great.
I have to give kudos to someone who is in this meeting. So Jamie, who is also a colleague of ours, I knew nothing of Minecraft, and she is a subject matter expert. And I asked her, like, what is Minecraft all about? What do I do? And she flat out said, run. But I've learned so much about Minecraft through Jamie and through Sammy that it's okay. It's not so bad. And it requires a lot of patience, a lot of focus. So I find it very interesting to see him sit longer than 30 minutes without having to get up and run a marathon. It's very calming for him. So it's actually quite therapeutic, if you will.
And actually it takes focus or it doesn't. Like there's other times in Minecraft, like quite honestly, when I play it and I build kilometer long train lines, I just sit in the train and watch everything go by. And I'll do that for 20 minutes. Just because I do that in real life as well is completely apropos of nothing.
Maybe we need to have a webinar on Minecraft.
Right?
A full Minecraft webinar. Yeah. So that's another thing that's great for self-care, right? You find something like that you enjoy. Like I do a lot of word games. So for me, I take a break and I play my Wordle and my Quordle and my Octordle, and that is I do like 8 of them. It's ridiculous, but it's my sort of downtime. I love it.
I think what needs to be said about self-care, though, is that you need, as a parent or a caregiver, you need to allow yourself this time daily, and it needs to be guilt-free. The reason why you need this self-care, this break for yourself, is the same reason that we are pushing for our divergent children to take these breaks as well. So essentially, we know that our kids need these breaks, these body breaks, these, fidget tools, these whatever, all of this stuff is important to them, but it's just as important to the caregiver and to the parent, in order to be able to continue, moving forward.
I trust that Kara's going to come back, but she froze on us for a minute there. So I think she'll be back. Yeah, I think the self-care point is really important, especially in these first few weeks. And we want to make sure that we take care of ourselves. We give our kids the space they need to process their day. After doing nothing all summer, it is going to be fairly intense for their bodies and brains to get back.
And they're
sleeping
also,
off.
we're starting over basically from scratch with the pandemic, hopefully being the end of whatever. This is going to be a new routine, like as compared to the last 3 years.
Yeah. Let's just hope they stay.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk a bit about homework now?
Dum dum dum.
I know.
Cara texted me her computer crashed, but she'll be getting back online.
We can talk about other things, but homework, I think I trust that everyone's going to want to hear about some homework strategies. In my house, homework is a nightmare. I cannot get my Ben, who's neurodivergent, to do homework, and I'm not sure what's going to happen this year. He's going into grade 8, and it's going to be interesting. He's going to have exams this year for the first time, so he's going to have to study, and I'm dreading it. So I'm excited to talk about this, for you to talk about this.
So I'm speaking on my behalf, and I know Cara and I agree on this. Neither of us think homework is a good idea. As a general, you must do this sort of homework every day. It often doesn't allow all children any reflection time. It doesn't allow them to take a break from school. And there's a whole bunch of studies saying that homework in and of itself doesn't do very much. It has marginal positive effect on a small amount of students. Now, that's our political statement. Boom. Let's talk about homework.
I agree with you entirely. I wish it didn't exist.
Well, the problem with homework is it's something that was done 150 years ago, and it becomes this routine that teachers are taught that you're supposed to do homework, but so rarely is anyone ever explain what the homework's for. Cara, I've just been on our political homework is a bad thing, and let's now talk about homework. And welcome back.
Thank you. If your child is getting too much homework, you can limit the homework. That's what I would say. Have an amount of time, do a little bit of everything, or prioritize. But they have been working probably at least twice as hard as the other kids all day. And now they come home and they're expected to do more work. I think we need to teach work-life balance, and homework, there's so much research that shows that homework is not actually helpful. So I understand if there's a little bit of catch up that needs to be done, but it should really be limited. It should not be a lot of work. I do something called the chunk and check-in with work. And I always recommend families use this. If your child isn't yet fully self-directed with their homework, you sort of review with them what they have them pick a subject. You take a look at how many questions or what the work is, and you assign like a small amount, like what you think is a manageable amount for them to do on their own for a few minutes. And then once they're done that, you check back in, you assign the next amount. So you're chunking the amount of work so it's less overwhelming. Like they don't feel like, oh my goodness, I have to do this many things. Math is one of the subjects that I think is easier to reduce and not cause too many issues at all, because you can look and say, okay, if your teacher assigned, let's say 30 questions and 10 of them are, this type of question, reduce that by half. Say, well, they were able to do 5 out of the 10 correctly. Like, what's the big deal? Move on to the next section. So like that's, you want to see that they understand the concept of whatever that type of problem is before you move on to the next type of problem. But that's pretty easy to reduce, and just send a note, or let the teacher know. Sometimes my child's cap is this much, and this is how I do it.
A teacher, like, as a teacher, we can't be upset if homework isn't done, because fundamentally, if you've set homework and it's not done, the only person that's in trouble is the student. And it's a choice. And if if a student does not have the spoons to do the homework, and I forgot we should be talking about spoons at some stage. If the student doesn't have spoons for the homework, making them do it is not going to get anywhere. It's not going to be easier. They're not going to retain the information. They're not going to retain any positive aspects that the homework could have done. As parents, as students, as teachers, we need to accept that. And yeah.
Sorry. I was going to ask if limiting homework can be one of the IEP learning strategies. And I know we're going to talk about IEPs, but is that a note to the teacher to say, we don't do homework, sorry, or we'll make our best effort with homework, or I'm going to write it right into the IEP that we don't do homework?
I think it can definitely be on the IEP, reduced chunked homework, things like that. Or I've never seen no homework, but I don't see why it couldn't be on there. But I think it's probably a discussion, and it's probably better to say, my child's, we prioritize mental health and well-being, and my child really needs a significant amount of downtime after school. So if we do homework, we do this amount of homework, and you can let me know what to prioritize. You can always have that kind of relationship with the teacher too, where you say, let me know if there's something that absolutely is necessary. But yeah, like what's going to happen? Not much.
Yeah. It's the negotiation part again. Like, much as I'm going to speak for myself just right now. I mean, there have been times my kids have brought home stuff that's homework, and it has to be done because there's a resourcing problem. An essay has to be finished because the unit's going to be finished on Friday, and maybe my child was away, and so that essay had to be done that night. You know what? Okay. It's probably not going to be the best essay, but that's a negotiation point. That makes sense. There's a reason for it. It just can't happen all the time. And it shouldn't happen all the time.
Yeah. I think as we get into high school, for sure, you were also teaching your child about prioritizing and how to manage a schedule. So I think a little bit in high school is definitely appropriate, especially projects and things like that, where you're doing a small amount each day. But you actually have to sort of teach your child, if they haven't been taught this at school, which often they aren't, that when you get an essay, or when you get an assignment that's meant to be done over like 3 or 4 weeks, that you don't just leave it to the last minute. I say this as I leave everything to the last minute, but I try and teach my students to be better than me. And that you can break something down and then just put on your agenda or your calendar or whatever it is. Okay, today I'm picking the PowerPoint template and I'm adding the title, and then the next day, okay, I'm going to add my intro slide, and, but you can teach them how to break things down into manageable bite-sized chunks.
My daughter has color-coded calendar, color-coded agendas. If she has a project that's in 4 weeks, she'll calculate how much time she needs, and she will say, it's like, if it's 12 minutes a day, she will do 12 minutes a day.
Wow, I love that.
Yep.
And one thing I like about breaking things down and teaching kids or teenagers to break things down is you can add in things that aren't on the the assignment list, because the assignment list doesn't include all the hidden curriculum items, like, you should build in time to practice your presentation, or, you should build in a day just to edit and fix up the grammar, things like that. So you can actually talk through the entire task, try and visualize it together. What are all of the steps required, whether or not they're listed on this outline?
And I bet in my experience from at a tertiary level, which university, college, the one thing that I hate about teaching first years is they haven't learned those time management skills and having things like editing and grammar checks and practicing presentations. That this is something, this is homework in one respect, but it's more like getting used to a structure. You don't actually have to do very much at home to do this, but it's like the importance of editing is not made strong enough. And editing is incredibly important at the tertiary level, the university college level. And the number of times that people have got an oral presentation and you can tell full well they're just standing in front of the class and they're actually speaking the words for the very first time. And it's like, that sort of life skill can be practiced at school, at high school. It can be practiced at elementary school, for that matter. Those sense of importance. Dominique, do you have anything? Are you just enjoying the conversation that we're having?
I am amazed by both your perspectives, and Julie, I see where your problems are. I can understand how that's challenging, especially in high school or grade 8. My whole process when it comes to homework is, and Carrie nailed it. So Carrie, you made a really great comment in the chat about incorporating some of that into life skills, and that's what we do. So my agreement, which I've put in both my kids' IEPs, is we send me the agenda for the week as what's expected for homework. And typically I don't know if it's just the grade 5, but my oldest in high school, he gets a list for the week of what's expected for homework. And I incorporate that into life skills. I don't have him sit and do, 30 minutes of homework a day. I know that he needs to focus on math on Monday, French on Tuesday, geography on Wednesday. So instead we have conversations, and we'll use math when we're measuring to make supper. We'll use French, when I, sit at the dinner table with him and I just speak to him in French and I'm using the verbs that he needs to practice for that week, or whatever the case is. You take this knowledge and you incorporate it into a life skill that would probably be more beneficial for him. And when the time comes where he's being tested, he's going to remember that particular activity that was talked about or that we did together, where he's going to be able to apply that skill. So that is my parenting tactic. But as far as from a family services perspective, for those living in Ontario, especially who have a form of funding, whether it's OAP or whether it's special services at home or ECSD, each school board or a school in particular should offer a tutoring program, and you are allowed to tap into those funds to hire a tutor to help with the homework piece. Because from a parent's perspective, and I've tried this in the past and I've realized it didn't work, which what we converted to life skills, is they don't listen to me because apparently I'm terrible at math and I'm terrible at science. I'm terrible at, I don't know what they know. I'm not sitting in a classroom learning what they're learning. So I'd rather hire someone else to take that moment and teach them what needs to be taught. And let them deal with the consequence, pay them, and get reimbursed through my funding. So it's always an option to be able to recruit someone to help support in that way. That way you're not dealing with that stress as a parent. You're able to take that 30 minutes, if that's what it takes for them to get their tutoring sessions, whether it's virtual or in person. Go for your walk, go take a shower, a hot bath, whatever the case is. Let someone else help with that. And that's an option for those receiving any form of funding. No matter what province you're in, you should have certain fundings allocated to you. And it's definitely an option. Talk to your teachers to find out what tutoring programs that school offers.
The worst tutor for a child is their parent.
Worse.
And the worst tutor for a child is a parent who's a teacher.
Yes.
I have refused to, I mean, I help my kids when of course I help my kids, but there's a time where it's like my son struggled with math the last couple of years, and I tried to help, but he was treating me like a parent, not a teacher. So my solution was I had access to grade 12 students who would love nothing more than to tutor their teachers' children, earn a little bit of money, and I think get bonus points for them. And Corbin had a tutor for 2 years who was absolutely fantastic. And they met once a week, maybe. Usually when he had a specific problem, a domain problem, they'd work through it. And it was great because she would explain things to him probably the same way as his classroom teacher was doing, but just slightly from a different angle. Don't do it yourself. Especially as they get older. Don't.
Especially.
So hard. Jamie's just mentioned here, and I know this is true at my son's high school, but that high school students can tutor special needs students and can tutor, actually in my son's high school, anybody, and use their hours towards volunteer requirements for graduation. So that's a place to look as well. If your child is in high school, you can speak to the guidance counselor, or you can find out about the tutoring program in the school. And poor Emily is struggling with her grade 1 child trying to throw his required reading into the garbage. And she said, she's a teacher and he's not listening to her. So she's feeling the same way you are, I think, Bruce.
I'm sad that it's required reading. I wish it was just like reading time, and he can choose, or I don't know if your child, yes, his, if he can choose what he's like. I think kids will, if we make reading a chore, it's going to feel like a chore and they won't want to do it. I think we have to, especially at home, but it wouldn't be great in school if they could read what they wanted. Whether it's graphic novels, whether it's picture books, whether it's listening to a podcast, actually activates the exact same part of the brain as physically reading. And we sort of have to validate different types of texts. So it's really sad that there's required reading in grade 1 to me. Instead of just like read for half an hour if you can. And then you could talk to your child about, well, do you know that when you read for half an hour, all of these wonderful things happen to your brain? And like, there are a whole bunch of infographics you can find that show like kids who read more have all of these benefits. And so if your child is a logical thinker, you might be able to frame it that way to get to them a bit more interested in the reading. And I don't know.
I did, I read with my son every night until he was about, I want to say 11. We would every night, because some days were tough and that was our wind down time. And he doesn't read so much anymore, but that was, we read some great stuff. I enjoyed it a lot.
Actually, just on the reading aspect, Kara made a point earlier about watching videos with subtitles. It's something that I didn't realize that I had some speech processing problems until I started watching videos without subtitles and realizing I couldn't understand what was going on. The other reverse of this is I would encourage every neurodivergent child to read while listening to somebody else reading the book. I think more research we're doing, the more we're finding that neurodivergent readers especially often need that extra input of the oral at the same time. It has made my son's reading, and he's going into grade 8 now, but in grade 7, he was struggling a little bit with his reading until his teacher said, oh, she had a resource of the books are being read, and he would read while listening. He was reading so much more and taking it and remembering, and it's both the visual and the oral being stimulated at the same time. And of course, you can tune out the oral to just read for a little while, or you could tune out the visual to listen for a little while. Allows them to have that choice. And I think that can be done from kindergarten to
graduate school.
Definitely.
I teach that to my graduate students too. Speechify and also Google Read and Write are two apps that they have free versions that can do this, can read PDFs, can read text out loud. So then you're getting access to the two modalities as you read, the listening and the visual. So and there's probably others as well.
So that's all about homework.
There shouldn't be any, and chunkin,
Well,
yeah, I know.
the chunk and check-in, I think I mean, it's brilliant. And it's maybe to finish that aspect of it again, it's to recognize the limitation your students, your kids have, and be okay with that. Don't let anybody say that they need to do something over and above what they cannot handle just because they're completely exhausted.
I had a student, this is an anecdote, and they were feeling really, really burnt out during the pandemic, to the point where they couldn't even enjoy things that they would normally enjoy at home. Like they were just sort of having trouble activating to do anything and just feeling frozen in anxiety. And after conferencing with this student, I spoke to their mom, and we just came up with a plan to give them Wednesdays off. If that's possible, why not have a mental health day? Doesn't have to be every week necessarily, but if your child's in an active crisis or an extreme stress situation, it might need to be weekly. But then we just talked with the classroom teacher and said, like, that's a day to accommodate as much as possible, not introduce new concepts if you can. And photocopy any notes or anything, really reduce the amount of catch-up required. And on that day, the student did whatever they felt like doing, playing with the dog, going for a walk, baking cookies, anything that was not schoolwork, unless if by the end of the day they felt like they could do homework, they might choose to do that. But they then were able to manage and feel quite successful the other 4 days of the week. And you are allowed to keep your child home for a day, or you're allowed to have a sick day for them, if that's something that you think is necessary for your child.
There's a question here. Well, there's a couple things here. Asa has mentioned that she does guided reading in kindergarten and sends home books that the educators have read with the students in class. The children can also bring home books from the classroom library and the school library for parents to read to their children. We never referred to it as required reading. It was always meant to be enjoyable for both the student and family. Even 15 minutes a day at the kindy level can help if possible. So that's a little guidance from a kindy teacher. Thank you, Asa. And then Katrina has said, has a question. They have been finding that their son is practically hysterical when he's picked up from camp. He's 4, but his camp teacher says he's had a great day. Any suggestions for his JK teacher to support him during the day? We've tried home days for mental health, etc., but this became an issue because it's inconsistent for him. And he's 4.
Okay. So many of our students or ourselves hold it together throughout the day. So it can look like we're having a great day, we're coping really well, and then we get home and that's when it's like meltdown or shutdown. So that's a sign that they need to be building in breaks. They need different types of breaks. Maybe ask your child what he would like. Does he want like a quiet break to read? Does he need a movement break? Does he need to get out of the classroom and sit somewhere quiet for a few minutes? And then that should be built in like every half hour, having some sort of break or choice of break. Not if you're having that reaction when they get home, that's a signal that they needed time to restore and catch up earlier.
So in the day, you're talking about
In
during
the day.
Yes.
So that would be something I'd ask for. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's always a problem. I mean, this is a problem I think with any kid, that they're at camp and everybody thinks that they're doing a great job, and the camp leaders go, "Did you have a good day?" And they go, "Yeah, it's great." And they get home and it's just like they're masking.
That's the word. That's the word. And it starts as young as 4 years old. It starts so young, and it's so important. I'm sorry, Bruce, I don't want to cut you off.
No,
it's so important because this means that the child is focused all day in trying to conform into an environment that is not designed for this poor little guy, right? So he's doing his best to conform and try to blend and try to fit in. And the minute that he is able to just be himself, he's just so overwhelmed and from this day of constant masking that he's probably just breaking down. So the teachers or the camp teachers or the, you know, JK or whoever, they need to know that he should be able to be free from masking and be in an inclusive environment. And if he needs a break, give him the break. If he needs to stem, let him stem. He needs to exert a lot of his energy, because if he's starting to mask now, it's only going to get worse as he gets older. That's my 2 cents.
So Katrina, I think there's nothing wrong with your child.
Nope.
I was just going to ask Katrina to unmute, actually. Katrina, if you want to unmute, maybe we can have a little conversation about this, because I think it's probably important for everyone. Hi there. How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Good. Your last comment is he will literally lie down in the parking lot at camp pickup.
Yeah.
My son was similar at the end of the day. So Bruce, back to you.
So I think even if I have to break it, so I mean, this is a problem, and I think this is a problem at camps, is that the camps are built to be busy, and everything is pushed into this time. And if a child is not seen to be busy, very often the camp leaders will be encouraging them. You get involved, do this, this, this. Again, this is not your son. Sorry, just had to make sure I got the pronoun right. This is not your son's problem. This is the way the teaching environment or the camp environment has been structured. So going into school, I think this is something you just need to be raising with the teacher and saying, this is the situation. And as Cara said before, and as Dominique said, it's like, he needs a break. He needs a regular break, and he needs to, there needs to be downtime actually for everybody in the classroom, but just maybe that encouragement.
I see your point though about if he was offered a break, he would refuse because he wouldn't want to miss out on anything. So maybe the opportunity is to go to the teacher, you know, right on the first day and say, please provide him with these breaks at certain times, instead of saying to him, do you want a break? Because he may not recognize that he needs a break, right? Am I right?
Yes, definitely. And it also might be, if your child's the kind of child who would be interested in having a little job, one of the best breaks we can do is like, oh, could you go take this to the camp office for me and then come right back, depending on the age, of course, and all of that. But sometimes having little structured opportunities like that, don't feel like you're missing out. You're doing something extra that's exciting. And then the other thing I would say is, I mean, this is going to sound obvious, so I don't mean it to be that way, but obviously talk to your child and ask what might make, you know, why he's feeling the way he's feeling and what would make him feel better. Like maybe we're assuming it's the energy cost, and maybe he's just sad that the day is over. Like sometimes the best insights we get are through collaboratively problem solving with children, to say, I've noticed that you're having a tough time at pickup, and you know, you're lying on the ground, and what's up? And see what some of the issues are, and then see what solutions your child can help you come up with and possibly agree with. I'm going to put a link in the chat. So Dr. Ross Green has a collaborative and proactive solutions approach, and this is a way of conferencing with children to get to the root of problems and come up with a plan that you and the child, or the teacher and the child, whoever it is, both can agree on. And it's not a unilateral, okay, you have to do this and this and this. The child actually has probably more voice potentially than the adult. And when I use this with kids, like I've discovered that often my assumptions about what the problem is are often completely incorrect. So this is so much more insightful. And then there are ways, if your child is nonverbal, there are also ways to ask them, like, you know, show me from 1 to 5 how true what I'm about to say is, with 5 being very true and 1 being not true at all, or 0 being not true at all. And then you would say, are you having trouble because it's too noisy? And then they would show you with their fingers. So there are lots of ways on that website that can help you figure out how to do this. And it works with any age. Obviously you change your language depending on developmental level, but you know your children. So
Thank you.
that answer your question, Katrina?
It's definitely a start. He struggles with communication, so it's definitely a start for sure.
Again, Katrina, there's nothing wrong with your son.
No, I
This-
just want to make sure that I'm not doing a disservice to him by sending him to camp or expecting him to participate in a full day of JK, or should I write, from the start, say he only attends half days or he only goes 3 days a week. I'm not really sure where to start because I don't want him to be so stressed out that he doesn't enjoy school. I want to set him up for success, but not overdo it.
I mean,
So I'm
you
not
could,
really
you could
sure.
have a plan with the school to start with half days for the first week or two, and then gradually build on the next week. And as long as you explain it to your son and so that your son understands what's happening and how the expectations will change.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a suggestion as well, Katrina. I think when it comes to camps and I've been there with nonverbal, my oldest was nonverbal until he was almost 9. The thing with camps, especially when they're going into, JK, that structure that the camp does offer prepares him for school, and and the social aspect is important as well. So as a parent, I often recommend, to my peers and my friends who have children on the spectrum, I think camp is important because it gets them into a similar routine as school. And from a professional perspective, I think it's a very strong, it's a positive experience in order to help with the social aspect. So don't give up. I think that you're doing, as parents, we do what we think is best, but it's hard when we're not able to learn, exactly what if it's our mistake or if it's during the day or if something triggered this behavior. It's hard for us to learn because, it's difficult for them to express that, but don't give up. You'll find a way to be able to communicate with your son and to figure out exactly, what the scope is. So Kara has provided and Bruce, they've both provided with some really good tools to be able to open those lines of communication with your son and with the teachers, and then just keep going, keep advocating.
Thank you.
And if you have more questions, call Dominique on our family on our family services line, because she's always there to answer calls.
I'll have to get that contact info. Thank you so much.
I'll plug it in right now.
I will just on that note, I will be sending an email out tomorrow with all of the contact info. So Bruce and Dominique are the voices at the end of the phone when you call Autism Canada for family services, family support. So if you do have questions, you are more than welcome to phone or email info@autismcanada.org. And they would be happy to help. And Kara obviously has an amazing website, and I know that you can send her. Oh, and Dom just put her email, her information in there in the chat for you. Candace, regarding camps, I know that maybe Dom can speak to this a bit more than me, but we do offer training for these kinds of things. We do not have a registry of camps that require training. However, Dom, do you have any further? No, we do have a couple of, we have a list of camps for neurodivergent kids, I think.
Right. So we actually, we are in the process of building a camp directory for all of Canada. So these are all the camps that offer a service, whether it's March break, summertime, or on the Christmas holidays. And it's a directory that one of our coworkers are putting together now. Some of these camps we've already reached out to and have had a training with them. But this directory it's a biggie. It's a doozy of a directory. There's a lot of camps out there. Some are designed for the neurotypical kids, but all camps should be inclusive camps, and your child, whether on the spectrum or other, should be able to attend these camps. And if it means getting that extra help, that's a completely different speaker series. We can talk about that for sure, but reach out to me and I would be more than happy to provide you with that information. But by the spring, I think maybe even earlier. So my guess is like end of February, we will have that directory of camps available for the 2023 seasons. And you'll be able to find all of these camps within your region. I just saw your comment, Candace. Yes, all of Canada, all of Canada.
It's these kinds of things are a big deal for us. We want to make sure that we can provide these resources. We also have a resource called Autism Junction. Dom, maybe you can talk to that a little bit because that might be interesting.
Right.
Well.
So on our website, under the publications key or tab, we have two very, very important documents that are posted there. They're actually going to be moved to like front line and center for our website at some point soon, hopefully. One of them is called the Provincial and Territorial Funding, and that document is essentially all of the provincial and federal funding available by province. So those of you who are seeking financial support, you can go to the Provincial and Territorial Funding document and find your province, and then you can find the list of funding that is available to you. And then apply directly that way. Then we also have our Autism Junction document, which is a very, very detailed document of autism related services and supports divided by divided by province. And then you'll even find the city that these agencies, organizations, and supports are located. So you just narrow it down to your city, and you can find all of this information on our website. It's on our publications page. And it's another huge doozy of a document.
So that took us a little bit away from the back to school topic, but
Sorry.
since you asked, we're going to share. What does anybody have any other questions? Oh, Bruce, we want to talk about spoons. Talk about spoons.
Yay for spoons. The concept of the spoon comes from a blog, and I need to have this person's name on my wall so I can remember. This woman has lupus, and they were trying to explain to a friend of theirs why they were so tired all the time, because lupus is an invisible disability, very much like most of our neurodivergent disabilities. And on the spur of the moment, the woman with lupus came up with this idea of spoons. And it goes like this. You just imagine that you have 50 spoons. And every time you do something, you have to take a spoon, and you can't use that spoon anymore during the day. And every activity takes a spoon. So if you are getting up in the morning, to get out of bed is a spoon. To go and brush your teeth is a spoon. To remember to put pajamas on is a spoon. To go and make your breakfast, and breakfast can maybe be 10 spoons to make. And then if you happen to, let's say you're going out to work or you're going out to school, what clothes am I going to be wearing? That could take 3 spoons. And when you run out of spoons, you can't do anything more. Your day is finished, you've run out of energy. This spoon metaphor is a wonderful metaphor to be using with children and with neurodivergent adults, because one, the acknowledgement is you only have a limited number of spoons in a day. And one of the bigger differences between a neurodivergent person and a neurotypical person is an activity that a neurodivergent person needs to do may take 5 spoons, where a neurotypical person may only need 1 spoon to do that. There's much more cognitive effort. Every time we are dealing with social situations, we have to be thinking about what's going on. It takes more spoons. Planning, you've only got a certain number of spoons. And so if you have, let's say you have an evening function, you need to make sure you have spoons for the evening function. And that may mean that you don't do something during the day because you'll run out of spoons. So the spoon becomes this, it's a silly metaphor in respect. It actually is like, what does it mean? But it's a wonderful, one of the good things about silly metaphors is that they're memorable. And it's something that I use all the time with my interaction with my children, with students, with our adults, talking about what's your spoon level like? And my daughter literally will come home she would often text us and say, out of spoons. That basically meant she came home, went straight to her room and sat down on the bed, and we didn't interact because she's flagged to us as parents that she's got there's no energy, there's no interaction that can go on. It'll be a waste of time and would just could turn, stressful. It also allows us to start talking about, you've got to do these 3 things. Just make sure that you don't spend all your spoons on doing step 1. You've still got 2 and 3 to go. So that's basically the spoons in a nutshell. It's a multivalent metaphor. Can be used in.
I love how visual it is too. Like, to me, it's like I can see my pile of spoons and I can see it getting smaller. And I think for a child, that's really that can be really effective, because it can be very visual. You could actually have something that you put in a jar, right? Like a marble or something that you put in a jar to teach a child how to sort of manage their day, which is kind of an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I just got distracted there. My dog here on the bed beside me. So does anyone have any questions? Because I think we've sort of broad stroked everything. Does anybody have any questions that they would like? No spoons left for homework. Exactly, Candace. Exactly. That's my house every night. Nice one. Does anyone have any questions? I'm happy to take you off mute. We've got a few more minutes left with our expert panel here. So we're happy to chat. If there's something specific you want to ask about, now's the time. You can put your hand up and I can try and unmute you, or you can put it in the chat. Nothing.
No spoons from anybody. Oh,
typing. Maybe someone's typing. Oh, Candace. Okay, I'm gonna unmute you, Candace.
Hi there.
Hi, Carrie. I'll get to your question in 1 second. Go ahead, Candace.
So my son is entering grade 2, and his peer group, the kids around him, are just starting to notice that he's a little bit different. That he marches to his own drum. My son doesn't mask at all, and I kind of applaud him for that. He's kind of to hell with y'all. I'm just me, and I'm going to be me. So, I'm okay with that. But he's starting to get blowback from his peers and his friends. I guess this question is more for Kara. Is there a way to approach it with the teacher I'm not even sure that we're going to tell my son, we're going to give him the labels. We think he's too young yet to really understand a lot of it. And so is there a way to prep the classroom, or that the teacher can prep the classroom without putting a label or a spotlight on him?
Teachers can do general inclusion lessons. It's more effective to do a peer lesson if there is a label, because then you can talk about the label. But I think that comes with student permission. Like your son would want to be involved in that. But I understand you haven't told your son yet. I will tell you this, just children tend to be less phased by the label than parent. Like it's emotionally so loaded for you as part of your journey, but for your child, especially when they get to the point where they are noticing that they're different, sometimes it's important to tell them why. And usually, like, all of my students who come to my program are told by their parents that they have a diagnosis of autism before they come. And usually the parent is anxious about it and the child is like, oh, okay. Or they might have questions, and, and every, I would say maybe 1 out of 10 would take it really to heart. But then you have to put in the work as a teacher and as a parent to have them understand what it means to have autism. And autism doesn't just mean all the things that are hard for them. But yeah, a teacher can do a general inclusion lesson, but you wouldn't normally give a lesson about a child without there being a reason why, because that can single them out a bit more. And and teachers, it depends how well versed the teacher is also in autism, and what the school board is. My school board has autism support teachers who can come in and do a lesson on autism. I have gone in with student permission and done lessons I've crafted with them. I've disclosed my own diagnosis to classes this year, which was really fun. I really enjoyed that. But when I do a lesson, it's in collaboration usually with the child.
Yeah, we haven't figured out how to, it's a lot. We literally just found out like mild to moderate ASD, ADHD presentation in both formats, and a visual processing disorder. So I don't even know where to start.
Well, I mean, actually feel free to email me and we can have this conversation. I'd be happy to chat with you about it and bounce ideas off one another.
Well, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Here, I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you, everybody.
Just a couple of resources for you, Candace, and I put them in the chat. But we have a girl we work with. Her name is Karis, and her brother Carter is on the spectrum, and he's nonverbal. And they do videos that are fantastic to teach about autism. So maybe the teacher could share that when you're ready to label, when you're ready to provide that label or give that information. They're great videos because they're done by kids. As well, there's a really great book called Clever Carter, written by the mother of those two kids, actually, which is a resource for teachers as well to share with their students. So there's a couple of great resources that you can check out there as well.
I have to give a little plug for Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood as well. They introduced an autistic character who was voiced by one of my students, and I just thought they did it in such a beautiful way. So for young children watching shows like that talk about everyone needs different things, and it did a really good depiction of sensory overload and things like that in the episodes.
Another quick PSA is that our Awesome Conference is coming up in October. It's on October 22nd. But the reason I'm saying this is because there's a young boy named Desmond. He's, I want to say 8. And he actually did a presentation for his class about autism, about the beauty of being different. And we'll be sharing that presentation at the conference. So if anyone's interested in that will be, you can register on our website for that. But there's a lot of kids that are really just being super proactive about sharing with their classmates and, teaching acceptance, really.
And just one thought I had that can sort of start the process without you saying the label at all yet is just start talking at home about like, oh, this is easy for my brain. This is hard for my brain. This is what I do. What do you do for your brain? Do you find it difficult when, you start having those conversations, and then you're giving your child the language to describe the experience without the label, and you're also sort of normalizing the idea that there is no normal. Everyone has brains that find certain things hard, and everyone can find workarounds. So that includes you and anyone else who lives in the house.
Oh, that's excellent. We've already started with everybody has something they're working on. That's sort of how we've approached it. So
yeah, we're all works in progress. That's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question. Anyone else have any questions? There's a few resources I see people have put in the chat. I will try and grab them all and send them out tomorrow as well.
I think Carrie had a question, Jules, about how often.
Oh yeah. Where did we go there?
How often do we have these Zoom?
Oh
yeah.
How often do we have these Zooms?
Once a year.
Well, we would love to do more of these. I think maybe one on masking would be really great. I'm seeing Katrina's note there as well. Our schedule isn't super consistent right now, and that's my fault, so I apologize. But if you watch our website, we will be doing more of these. We did a few last year as well, so there are some really great YouTube. On our YouTube channel, you can see the ones from last year. We did one about human connection. We did, Kara spoke about supporting your child's education. We had someone talk about sleep. We had someone talk about meditation and mindfulness for kids on the spectrum. So there are some on our YouTube channel. I will send that link out. I'm just thinking about, we do have a podcast as well, if anyone wants to listen to that. Another plug, I'm sorry, but you're asking for resources. So we have a podcast that's called Sharing the Spectrum. And it's available wherever you listen to podcasts. And we are going to be adding a lot of things to that podcast in the coming months. In fact, we've sort of changed strategies there, and it's going to be a lot of conversations between Bruce and Dominique and myself about some of the frequently asked questions we get. So masking would be a great one. There's lots of things about, there's a big list of frequently asked questions we get, and we want to have those resources available. And of course, once again, I'm going to remind everyone that Kara has an amazing podcast called Autistic
Tidbits and Tangents.
Thank you. Autistic Tidbits and Tangents. And I'll share that link. But yeah, there's lots of things available, and we will share any more of these series on our website, on social media, and in our newsletter. So if you haven't signed up for that, maybe do, or follow us on one of our social channels. We're on all of them. So feel free to click, and all of this information will be there. Any other questions? And if you have, sorry, one more thing, Bruce, sorry, just to totally cut you off, and I said I wasn't going to talk. If you have any topics that you would like to hear about, or you would like us to discuss, pop us a note, info@autismcanada.org, or send it directly to me at julie@autismcanada.org. I would be more than happy to take requests. I'm like a DJ that way.
So my question is, Katrina, what would the workshop on masking, what are you looking for?
I guess I just want to sort of jump into more what I touched on about my son at camp. I heard someone say that, if he's starting masking this young, we really worry about how this will present when he's older. And I know that he is 100% masking all day. He's done that in therapy. He's done that with relatives. He's done that at camp. I'm pretty sure he's going to do it at school as well. And I worry that he won't get to a point where he'll feel comfortable enough to just be himself. And I don't know how to encourage that at this age, and would like to just maybe focus on that a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one idea that you could try. You can't obviously control or necessarily see what's happening at school, but I think as soon as your child walks through the door, like having that box of fidgets, encouraging like stim breaks, maybe like whole family stim dances, where you experiment with channeling movement, and just once they're home, they can do all of the things that they need. So make sure that home is always their safe place, and like look up as much as you can, get in touch with the autistic community. They're on Twitter and places like that. And you can sometimes find really good ideas for things that are more naturally autistic behaviors, like stimming and needing to have fidgets and things like that to channel energy.
For sure. I've sent little kits to school with him. He doesn't take them out because not everybody has those kits, right? So at home, he has access to all the tools. It's just when he's not with us that I do worry. Yeah.
One of the good experiences I had at school for my youngest son was that he had one of those elasticy things around his chair, the bands, and the teacher made them for every kid. So every kid had them on their chair, and that meant that no one felt like they were exceptional, although they were all exceptional. So I think that, there's a way to maybe talk to a teacher about offering it up for everybody. Maybe, I know this would probably cost money, but these days fidget spinners are not very expensive, I don't think, but maybe you buy 20 and you take them into the teacher and say, I want each kid to have this so that my child feels like he's not the only one. I don't know, that's maybe a crazy suggestion, but
I'm all for it, but I really don't want to overstep my boundary with the suggestions and the things I'd like to see, but I also want my son to feel comfortable. So it's a very fine line.
And you're his only advocate. So, other than himself. So you have to make sure you are doing what's best for him, for sure. It's okay. It's very tricky. I agree.
Yeah.
It's very tricky.
We're going to talk, when we talk about the IEPs and IPPs and ISLPs, we're going to be talking about it's always fine to ask a question. It's always fine to ask to suggest something. teachers by and large are very accommodating and want to help all their students. So it can be a little overwhelming in the first week, just put that in the back of the mind, but it's like, from a teacher, I always wanted to hear what a parent suggested to make their child have a better experience. I always wanted to hear that.
Another just quick resource, and we're talking about sort of communicating with teachers. If you weren't here last week, Kara, we sent out in our follow-up email last week links to Kara's website, because she has some excellent self-advocacy pages that are really easy for kids to fill out and send in to the teacher. So instead of maybe you writing a letter on the first day, you have your child, or you work with your child on filling out one of these forms, and they're fantastic. So I highly recommend you check those out on Kara's website. I will provide the link again though, because I think they're really great, just to say, this is what I need, this is who I am, this is what I look like, this is, so it also helps, I think, the child sort of self-identify with some of the things that they need. So. I'm just writing things down here, sorry.
And you can follow up like a couple of weeks later and reiterate what was in that, and just say, my child, gets really overwhelmed during the day, and you might not notice it at school, but at home, and this is what we see, and breaks are really helpful. Like you can send an email later and just explain where you're coming from, and say, if you have any questions, or if you want to set up a time to chat, I'm open to that. And teachers are collecting a lot of information about students in that first month, and really getting to know everyone as individuals. So having that information that they can look at when they're ready to, probably after that first week, is really helpful as a teacher.
Thank you so much. That's another good point, not to overwhelm in the first week with a ton of information. Probably check in a couple weeks after school has started. That's a great tip. Thank you.
Or even like item by item. So if, I don't know, no one's organizing a trip in the second week of school, but if they were, then you would send an email about, on trips, my child needs this. Or, if there's a test, you might say, my child's very anxious on a test. So if you don't want to overwhelm right away, you can also do it if there is
In
something
increments.
pressing. Yes, in increments, exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Anyone? Hand raises or in the chat? I don't see any. Okay, well, in that case, I will find my note about saying thank you. I'd like to, sorry, I've been taking notes on the back of my notes, and now I'm sort of confused, but I just want to make sure that I can send out a good follow-up email tomorrow. So again, tomorrow you will get a follow-up email from me with links and with information about what we talked about tonight, as well as a link to this video, because we have recorded, and also this conversation in a podcast format. So if you want to listen to it again, you can. I want to really thank Kyra and Bruce and Dominique for being here, because we couldn't do it without them, and they are so great at this, and I enjoy working with them so much, and they can answer every question, and there's always a really cute cat in the video. So thank you all for taking your time, Dom, especially tonight on the first day of school with your kids. I know you're tired and it's been a long day, but thank you for being here. And the next session we're doing on IEPs and IPPs is on September 13th. So if you are registered for this webinar, which you all are, you will get a notice about that as well. And just please remember that our family services team, Bruce and Dom, are here for you. We as an organization are here for you. If you have questions or concerns, always feel free to reach out, call us, email us. Kara is amazing as well. Send a note to her through her website or through her email, which she shared. And we're always happy to help. So thank you for being here. We hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time at our IEP and IPP webinar. And we will talk about maybe some other topics for these evenings as well, because they are fun. So thanks everyone for being here, and appreciate your time, and have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.